I just got hit with a trick question from my producer, Ryan. And every now and then there's times where I swear to goodness, Ryan asks me questions to piss me off. I mean, I really think that sometimes. Ryan was a college wrestler. He went on to become a doctor. He's now he got a young daughter in his house that's an aspiring 2024 Olympian. He's been a manager of MMA. I mean, to act as though Ryan doesn't know exactly what's going on, not only in the world of sport, but in the world of this sport, would be false. So when he asks me a question that doesn't make any kind of sense, I feel like he's trying to work me up. But then he's got, you know those friends of yours that they'll just sit there with that surprised face like, oh man, I don't know really why you've lost your cool. I lost my cool because you tried to get me to lose my cool. You know me well enough that you pushed my button. So here's the question that he asked me. He says, and he asked it like Chael, what's the appropriate amount of fights to have before you go into the UFC? Well, okay. Who are you? What have you done before? Right? Are you Paulo Costa, where all you've done is lift weights? You saw this thing called mixed martial arts and you decided you wanted to jump in there? Yeah, it would make a level sense that whether you get those rounds in the practice room in the form of sparring, or you come up through an amateur circuit or a small regional scene, that would be a very real thing. Are you BJ Penn, where you won the world championship in jiu-jitsu at a time in the sport when everybody was trying to learn jiu-jitsu, when still one craft stood out from another, jiu-jitsu was dominant, and you were the champion of the world in jiu-jitsu? What if you're a Cain Velasquez, where you've only had a couple of fights, and Javier Mendez finally calls up Dana White and goes, hey, Dana, look, I need a favor. I got this dude. He's big. He works hard. But he's scary and no one will fight him. I'm trying to start this guy's career. I'm trying to do everything right. I can't get him a fight. The only person that can get him a fight is you, because guys will fight who you tell them to fight. And Dana's like, yeah, man, I'll help you. What's this guy's name? Yeah, Velasquez. Yeah. Text me. Bye. But there's a realness to that. And then Cain Velasquez is a totally different story. He was a heavyweight wrestler at Arizona State. He was a couple of time All-American. That's combat, though. That's taking your shirt off at an agreed upon time with an opponent where you're going to have a differential set in scoring upon score and maneuvers and time. That sounds a lot like MMA. I mean, do you see how that starts to be pretty close? So if you were to just go grab a guy off the street, even if he was a really great athlete and he had a good passion and he could run 5 miles in one setting without stopping him, well, no, he's going to need some minutes. Paul Felder was just on a commentary. They were out in Fight Island, and these two guys were fighting. They had very limited records. And Felder was commenting on it, going, you don't understand. The reason that you're seeing some of these younger guys in this next generation with only a couple fights next to their name is because they didn't grow up having to do this sport and then this sport over here and try this in the summer and then come together and do this thing called MMA. They came up through an amateur series since they were 11 and 12 and 13 years old, which is very true. That is now going on in parts of the world. We don't have it yet. Here in the States, you cannot be a minor and go out and do mixed martial arts. I think that's going to change. Considering you can go and do Taekwondo, you can go and do boxing, you can go and do wrestling, you can go and do judo. I would believe that you must go out and do MMA. The difference is, just so you guys understand this, is each of the sports that I just named are Olympic sports. There is a law that says no government body, which is where the commissions come in, no governing body can interfere with an athlete competing or training for an Olympic sport. We're not here to do some movement and let kids go out there and do MMA. I'm just predicting for you that I do believe that will loosen. I think optically is probably what stopped it. I know for me it did. I know for me, a period of time ago, and I probably matured past it. 2 kids in there? Absolutely not. Nope. Won't have any part of it. Won't watch it. Won't buy a ticket. Get up and walk out of the room. That's wrong. Well, you gotta quit being such a prude, learning what we're starting to learn now. You know, look at the way boxing does it, right? You throw them in the headgear and you add some ounces to the gloves. There's ways to do that. That's not at all what this talk is. Not even a little bit. But to Ryan's question of how many fights do you need before you go into the UFC? I mean, it's just a double-edged sword, because there is also a tremendous misconception, okay? Or a uniqueness, perhaps, would be a better word than even misconception. With experience, you get better. That makes sense on anything. Anything you're talking about. You go make cookies 20 times, batch number 20 is likely to be better than number one. We understand that, but MMA is a major tipping point where you start to get a diminishing return. Guys do not get better by going out there and doing it. That is false. They leave a piece of themselves behind once you reach a certain level. Once you reach a certain level in boxing and in MMA, you leave a little something out there every time. To where when your career ends, it isn't necessarily because of your age, as people will talk about, oh, he's no longer in his prime. That's something that people can see and quantify, and that appears to be what's happening. That isn't what's happening. What's happening is you have a number. You reach that number. That chamber's got so many rounds in it. You fire that thing and you will reach your last round. So in the world of MMA, how many matches do you have to have before you go into the UFC? It doesn't work that way. What did those matches look like? How many minutes were burned? What were those rounds? Who was the competition? I mean, you can get what somebody else would need 7 or 8 years worth of experience. You could get in 3 matches if they were with the right guy, if it was the right kind of matchup, if it was the right placement on the card. Were you down in the locker room and you were sitting listening to the roar of the crowd for 3 hours before you walked on at the end of the night? I mean, just saying, there's a lot of experiences you get that don't have anything at all to do with this, that don't have anything to do, right? That don't have anything. There's other things that you have to experience. What happened within your life? I mean, in large part, you want to know what I think the right answer is when the guy says he's ready. From the beginning of this sport, we have taken a guy at their word on all levels. You contact a commission, you want to be a judge. Commissioners, what experience do you have? Why should I put you as a judge? Ultimately, if the guy says he can do it, I'm an honest guy. I follow the sport. I know what I'm looking at. I got good energy. Okay, we'll put you in. You want to be a referee? I mean, in large part, that's how it works. I've got my own personal story with Mark Schultz. Mark Schultz famously fought Rickson Gracie had a day of jiu-jitsu training. He famously fought Rickson Gracie. He admittedly lost to Rickson. Rickson will also admit it took him about 20 minutes to beat Mark. Took the Rickson Gracie, absolute legend, 400-0, but he had to work a little bit to get Schultz out of there. So Schultz then learned something from Rickson. He learned, man, this jiu-jitsu is a real deal. And Schultz was an Olympic champion and wrestler. He was a rough customer. He wasn't just some guy. But he also always believed whoever the better wrestler was the more dangerous. Rickson showed him otherwise. Schultz goes and shines up at a jiu-jitsu gym the very next day. And Schultz started doing that on and on and on, and he got passionate about it, and he couldn't get above a certain belt, and I want to say it was brown. Throw that part of the story out. Mark Schultz is a black belt. Mark Schultz will enter competitions as a black belt. Mark Schultz has put out DVDs for people to buy as a black belt. Mark Schultz will represent himself as a black belt, and absolutely nobody will question that black belt. Mark Schultz actually bought that black belt at an old department chain called Mervyn's. I don't know if Mervyn's still exists, but he could not get a belt. He could not get a promotion. He went and bought the belt. And he walked into his school the next day with it, which would, any of you that belong to jiu-jitsu could understand how poorly that's going to go over, and nobody said a word. He's a black belt. But there's something to be said for, when is a guy ready? The guy's ready when he says he's ready.